The woman apologized. She had stumbled right into the man's bathroom. The moment her fingers touched the man's cold skin, the man immediately turned his head in alarm. He saw a woman as seductive as a vixen, but he didn't know this little vixen, so he angrily threw her out. While busy covering his body, he roared, "Get out!" However, Jiang Qingli suddenly pressed close with a smile, gently caressing the man's firm chest. "President Chung, I accidentally dirtied your clothes just now. I came specially to apologize to you in person, to make amends." After President Chung, displeased, pushed her away again, he blindly pulled down a bath towel to cover himself. "Are you sure this is how you make amends?" In the bathroom, Jiang Qingli. She immediately put on a pitiful and wronged expression. Whether it was her innocent eyes or the angle of her head, she had practiced it thousands of times, certain Chung you would not be able to resist. All right, since the man wouldn't come to her, she would take the initiative. Suddenly, she fiercely pinned the man against the corner of the wall. "Actually, we're university alumni. I fell for you at first sight, senior. Just give me a chance, okay?" The deliberately drawn-out ending of her words made the man's heart itch. Just then, a phone rang, instantly breaking the ambiguous atmosphere in the bathroom. President Chung immediately came to his senses, once again angrily pushing away this alluring vixen. Before leaving the bathroom, he didn't forget to warn her viciously, "Get out. Don't make me say it a second time." However, Jiang Qingli had put in a lot of effort for this moment. Take the banquet just now, for example. She pretended to accidentally spill a large glass of red wine all over the man, and she conveniently fell to the ground. "I'm sorry. My high heel twisted my ankle. How about I help you wipe it off?" At this moment, any man with a bit of gentlemanly conduct would immediately step forward to help the delicate beauty up. But this Chung Yu was no gentleman. The man looked down in annoyance, glancing at his stained haute couture suit and watch. He just coldly dropped a "no need" and turned to go to his private suite to clean up. As the man left heartlessly, Jiang Qingli's ankle instantly stopped hurting. All the innocence and grievance vanished. All that remained was her determined plan B. Then, using the room card she had gone to great lengths to obtain, she tiptoed into President Cheng's suite. As expected, the man was taking a shower in the bathroom, so she decided to stage a forced romance in the bathroom. But it was the woman forcing the man. The other party actually still had the mind to go and answer his fiancée, Xia Jinxiao's phone call. But the call came at the perfect time. If Xia Jinxiao heard her fiancé's betrayal with her own ears and died of anger on the spot, it would save her a lot of effort in her revenge. With this thought, she immediately pressed up against the man's back and shouted coquettishly into the phone's microphone, "President Chung, how could you leave me all alone?" After speaking, she looked up and lightly licked the man's sensitive ear. Instantly, a tingling sensation rushed to his heart. President Cheng's expression froze. The next second, he violently grabbed the woman's restless hand. He directly pressed her onto the bed. As the phone fell beside them, Xia Jinxiao on the other end of the line became anxious. What happened? Why is there a woman's voice? To avoid unnecessary trouble, President Chung simply covered the vixen's mouth tightly with one hand and replied to the phone that he was fine. There was no woman. She must have misheard. However, Jiang Qingli was not as weak and obedient as she appeared. So what if her mouth was covered? She could still use her tongue to seduce the man's fingers. The man was truly angry now. He had never seen such a shameless vixen. He felt relieved only after hastily hanging up the phone. He released his hand. Only then could Jiang Qingli take big gulps of air. That was a close call. She almost died before her revenge was complete. After catching her breath, she continued her act, lightly tracing his firm chest with her fingertip. "I don't think it's going to be easy for President Chung to explain this. What should we do?" Suddenly, a glint flashed in the man's eyes. He grabbed the woman's wrist, asking with a half-smile, what should be done? Seeing her chance, Jiang Qingli boldly wrapped her arms around the man's neck, blatantly trying to steal her enemy's powerful backer. If you can't solve the problem, just get rid of the person who is the problem. How about a new girlfriend? A broad palm traveled up the woman's thigh. Suddenly, the man's lips curled into a playful smile. He roughly threw her, clothes and all, out of the room. The door slammed shut violently. Furious, Jiang Qingli complained loudly. What kind of taste does Xia Jinxiao have to find such an unresponsive dog of a man for a backer? Since the uncle is hard to seduce, then she would seduce the uncle's most beloved nephew, Tang Yang, a young, fun-loving playboy. She had barged into a strange man's bathroom and even pinned the man to the wall, staging a forced romance in the bathroom. Yet, a week after being thrown out of the room, she appeared with the identity of the nephew's girlfriend. Pulling the man to hide in the restroom, they engaged in a forbidden kiss. Who was to blame? It could only be Chung Yu's fault. This uncle was just too unresponsive. So Jiang Qingli could only choose indirect seduction, starting with Chung Yu's nephew, Tang Yang, a young, fun-loving playboy. In just one short week, Jiang Qingli successfully won him over with her persona of a pure, innocent white lotus. On this special day, she would use her identity as the nephew's girlfriend to continue her seduction. The moment the suite door was opened, she immediately noticed the figure that stood out from the noisy surroundings. From President Cheng's shocked eyes and slightly trembling hand, she knew the man not only saw her, but also recognized her. A good start. It seems she left quite a deep impression on him. Next, she obediently followed her boyfriend to greet him. "Hello, Mr. Chung." As soon as she spoke, Tang Yang was suddenly surprised. How did his little girlfriend know his uncle's surname was Chung? Faced with this question, Jiang Qingli didn't know how to explain for a moment. In truth, her heart was in a panic. At this moment, President Chung, with a sarcastic tone, preemptively explained for her, if you want to climb the social ladder of the Tang family, of course you have to investigate their ancestors for 8 generations first. Don't you think so? However, the love-struck Tang Yang immediately disagreed. He quickly stood up to defend his little girlfriend. Qingli is not that kind of person. I must have mentioned it before. I've forgotten it myself, but Qingli remembers every word I've said. At the same time, Jiang Qingli squeezed out a few wrong tears, nodding timidly in agreement. "Qingli, don't mind him. My uncle isn't usually like this. I'm fine. I'm just going to the restroom." Her tear-streaked, pitiful appearance instantly aroused Tang Yang's strong protective instincts. If his girlfriend hadn't stopped him, he probably would have followed her into the women's restroom. Of course, Jiang Qingli wouldn't agree to him following, because a certain someone would definitely come. So, she leisurely touched up her makeup in the restroom. While waiting for him, she had calculated that President Chung would come looking for her. But she didn't expect the man to be so rough. He directly twisted her hands behind her back and pressed her against the wash basin counter. She heard President Cheng's stern warning that I advise you to leave my nephew on your own, or I'll make you regret it. However, Jiang Qingli wasn't scared at all. Instead, after breaking free from the man's grip, she actually took the initiative to rub her exposed back against the man's chest, asking coyly, "Are you jealous?" President Chung, annoyed, lifted her onto the cold counter. He was about to continue his threats, but he didn't expect this position to accidentally give her foot an opportunity. Her restless foot slid up the man's calf, and she even pressed her knee against his firm buttocks. Taking advantage of his momentary surprise, she brazenly wrapped her arms around the man's shoulders, teasing, "So, Senior doesn't like it in the bathroom. You prefer in the restroom, huh?" President Chung was instantly enraged. He pinched the woman's chin, warning her again through gritted teeth to stop before she went too far. However, Jiang Qingli smiled brightly and proposed an exchange. "As long as you become my boyfriend, I promise to leave your nephew immediately. How about one boyfriend for another?" Suddenly, a knock on the door and Tang Yang's voice were heard. "Qingli, are you in there?" President Cheng's whole body stiffened in shock. He didn't even dare to breathe. But Tang Yang outside, hearing no reply, became more anxious, calling his girlfriend's name even louder. A glint flashed in Jiang Qingli's eyes. She shouted towards the door, "Yang, I'm here." She had just shouted when the man fiercely covered her mouth, preventing her from making any sound. Now President Chung was in a difficult situation. He could only suppress his anger and whisper for her to get his nephew to leave first. Jiang Qingli nodded in agreement. However, the moment the man released his hand, she suddenly yanked his tie and planted a kiss on the man's cool, thin lips. President Cheng's hand uncontrollably lifted, then quickly froze in midair, using all his strength to restrain his desire. A moment later, it was Jiang Qingli who took the initiative to end the kiss. Like a little cat that had successfully stolen a heart, she licked her lips with relish. President Cheng's anger instantly intensified. Just as he was about to lose his temper, she forcefully pushed him behind the door. At that moment, Tang Yang, worried that something had happened to his girlfriend, kicked open the restroom door. Separated by just a door, on one side was the uncle who had just been forcibly kissed by his nephew's girlfriend, and on the other was the love-struck nephew worried about his girlfriend. President Chung, behind the door, gave the woman a death stare that said, "If you dare say anything, you're dead. Jiang Qingli suddenly smiled, shyly asking Tang Yang to help her buy a pack of sanitary pads. As she spoke, she forcefully pushed the door back. Sure enough, Tang Yang was sent away. But President Cheng's nose was hit hard by the door, and it hurt. He wanted to cry out, but was afraid of being heard, so he could only grit his teeth and bear it in silence. Just then, Xia Jinxiao's checkup call suddenly came. Jiang Qingli leaned in, mimicking the tone of those green tea girls, and said, "Having a girlfriend who bombards you with calls all day must be tiring. If I were your girlfriend, I definitely wouldn't do that. I would definitely know how to cherish you more." President Cheng's temples throbbed at this undisguised, provocative talk. Rather than being endlessly entangled with this vixen, it was better to meet tomorrow at 8 p.m. to sort things out once and for all. Hearing this, Jiang Qingli readily agreed. She was very pleased with herself. The green tea tactics from TV dramas really worked. Men aren't saints, after all. See, he took the bait. She was hiding in the restroom with her boyfriend's uncle. Separated by just a door on one side was the uncle who had just been forcibly kissed by his nephew's girlfriend, and on the other was the love-struck nephew worried about his girlfriend. She moved effortlessly between the two men, switching back and forth between a white lotus and a vixen. Jiang Qingli, with a freshly flushed face, told her boyfriend there was no need to see her home. Her understanding and considerate demeanor was something Tang Yang had never seen in his many ex-girlfriends. However, as her boyfriend, he insisted on helping her call a car. But as soon as her boyfriend left, the gentle little white flower instantly switched to a seductive little fox. She silently mouthed a reminder to President Cheng, "See you tomorrow night." President Cheng's eyes instantly darkened, and he irritably raised his eyebrows. Today was a special day for Jiang Qingli, so she didn't want to linger. Besides, her goal was achieved. She smiled and said goodbye to her boyfriend. The smile on her face instantly vanished. With tears in her eyes, she urged the driver to hurry. She needed to get to her sister's birthday. The dark cemetery was so quiet, you could only hear the pitter-patter of the rain. Today was her sister Jiang Yueching's birthday. As always, she brought her sister's favorite lilies. Her sister had the most beautiful soul in the world. But what was the result? Xia Jinxiao not only spread vicious rumors about her sister, but also bribed the school to frame her sister as a murderer. She was clearly lured to the rooftop by Xia Jinxiao. But the police, wary of her fiancé, Cheng Yu, didn't even investigate and hastily closed the case as a suicide. Who could swallow this injustice? The murderer Xia Jinxiao and her fiancé Cheng Yu. She swore she wouldn't let a single one of them go. Suddenly, her hateful emotions were interrupted by stinky tofu being held out in front of her. Qin Shuhe gently handed her a portion of stinky tofu and placed another portion in front of the tombstone. His eyes were slightly red, and his voice was deep and melancholic as he murmured, "Every year on Yueching's birthday, you two sisters would rather skip the cake to stand in a long line to buy Chen's stinky tofu." These words instantly brought back the most beautiful memories for Jiang Qingli. Tears unconsciously streamed down, mixing with the rain on her face. After a moment, she softly wished her sister a happy birthday and planned to leave first, letting Qin Shuhe stay and talk with her sister. As she turned, she suddenly heard Qin Shuhe's voice from behind her. "Qingli, it's not too late to stop. I think if Yuecheng were still alive, she would want you to live a carefree and happy life like before, instead of wasting your whole life on that group of scumbags." However, Jiang Qingli suddenly turned her head, her reply unusually firm, "That if my sister can come back to life, I'll stop immediately. Otherwise, I will make that group of bastards pay a painful price." With that, she left without a second thought, walking into the cold rain, officially embarking on her path of revenge. Seducing her enemy's man, she actually got carried away. From the forced romance in the bathroom, to the forbidden kiss in the restroom, and now she stormed into the man's company. She decided to have a proper, ambiguous entanglement under the surveillance cameras. Isn't that exciting? She had no choice. She had already used all her tricks on Cheng Yu, and that man was still such a dog. Last night, he made her wait foolishly for a full 3 hours. Originally, she thought the dog man was deeply in love with the evil woman, which was why he let her abuse her power and cause her sister's death. But last night, she accidentally overheard. President Cheng actually yelled at Xia Jinxiao on the phone, "Since I promised to give you the position of Mrs. Cheng, I will. You don't need to use that incident to pressure me anymore." It seems the dog man doesn't cherish the evil woman as much as she thought. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching from a distance. She subconsciously turned her head to look. Oh, the dog man finally decided to show his face. Handsome and aloof as always. So aloof that she couldn't help but want to tease him. However, the other party was the first to throw out a file. Jiang Qingli, 24 years old, a top student from a top university in Beijing. 2 years ago, you suddenly transferred back to Jiangsheng and enrolled in a master's program at a lesser university, and it's only a 2-year correspondence course. Hearing the man calmly state her background information, her breathing hitched nervously. She secretly wondered, could this man have already found something out? No rush, stay calm first. So she suddenly tilted her head slightly, a smile playing on her lips. Hee, senior, is this a routine investigation, or am I special to you? As she leaned her body slightly forward, she gently touched the man's shoulder. She even blew a puff of air towards his sensitive ear. President Cheng's body uncontrollably stiffened. He immediately turned sideways to shake her off. You clearly had better options back then. Why did you choose my alma mater? And you even gave up your master's degree. The man paused halfway through his sentence, gently stroking her hair, and continued his questioning in a confident and low voice. Oh, you were determined to get me 2 years ago? For the bidding project I have. Am I right? But Jiang Qingli just blinked her big, watery eyes and smiled. She liked this kind of narcissistic man, because the more narcissistic a man is, the more he enjoys the satisfaction brought by his own charm. She gracefully moved closer to the man. In his broad embrace, her fair neck was seductively revealed between her hair. The man's Adam's apple bobbed uncontrollably. He immediately pulled away in a fluster, viciously tossing out a line that it doesn't matter who your boss is behind the scenes. I'll pay double. In short, you take the money and leave. Disappear completely. After the warning, the man left quickly. However, Jiang Qingli, who remained, had pride and fighting spirit brimming in her eyes. Chengyu, see you tomorrow. No, it should be see you every day. The next day, amidst the infatuated gazes of numerous female employees, President Cheng walked confidently into the Cheng Group building. Early in the morning, the man received a flattering message from his nephew Tang Yang, saying he had bought him coffee. He never comes without a reason. It seems the silly boy has gotten into trouble again. The moment he looked up, he saw an unbelievable figure. Jiang Qingli was standing at the elevator entrance, wearing a human resources department suit. The formal professional uniform was somehow worn by her with a kind of coquettish charm. Seeing her greet him properly, President Cheng, he felt an inexplicable sense of annoyance and unfamiliarity. He frowned and immediately cleared his throat. He coldly ordered to the 32nd floor. As soon as the elevator doors closed, President Cheng questioned who gave her the nerve to come here. Jiang Qingli fluently explained that Cheng Group is a large corporation and she was here for an internship. But President Cheng didn't believe a single word. Such a lame excuse was only good enough to fool a silly boy like Tang Yang. This little vixen must be trying to steal the company's confidential documents. However, the vixen's claws crept inch by inch up the man's suit. While loosening his tie, she lightly scraped his bobbing Adam's apple with her fingertip. The next second, she suddenly hooked her arm around the man's neck, practically hanging her entire body on him. You are the secret I want to steal. Oh, a complex look flashed in President Cheng's eyes that I advise you to behave. There are cameras here. What's a little camera to Jiang Qingli? The camera is exactly what she wants. Suddenly, she yanked the man's tie again. Caught off guard, President Cheng lost his balance. He quickly supported himself with both hands on either side of the woman. On the monitor, a suggestive scene instantly appeared. At this moment, Jiang Qingli's eyes were as captivating as peach blossoms. I'm wearing rose-flavored lipstick today. Are you sure you don't want to have a taste? After speaking, she guided the man's finger. The man's gaze unconsciously lingered on the woman's lips. He wanted to resist, but couldn't help but desire it. He even absent-mindedly rubbed them back and forth. Suddenly, the woman's tongue lightly licked his finger. He trembled slightly. Jiang Qingli naturally caught President Cheng's sensitive reaction and even laughed with pleasure. Admit it, senior. You were happy to see me just now. Your body actually desires me. President Cheng was instantly ashamed and angry, unconvincingly retorting, I don't. But his cheeks turned a very honest shade of pink. While holding the identity of his nephew's girlfriend, she seduced her boyfriend's uncle. What bad intentions could she have? She just wanted to use the opportunity of getting close to the uncle to get revenge on his fiancée. Even though Jiang Qingli could feel that President Cheng had developed feelings for her, the man stubbornly retorted that he hadn't. He even impatiently ordered her to get lost. Jiang Qingli became a little anxious. How could this be? This elevator operator internship. She had begged her boyfriend, Tang Yang, and it was only through Manager Wang's connections that she managed to get in. But unexpectedly, President Chung fired Manager Wang on the spot, even though he had worked there for 10 years. Watching Manager Wang chase after President Chung for his job, constantly begging for another chance. However, President Chung was completely unmoved. This isn't the first time you've used your position for personal gain to arbitrarily arrange for someone to join the company. If you resign voluntarily, the company will compensate you. But Jiang Qingli was furious at the man's cold-blooded, iron-fisted style. So she immediately jumped out, stating her willingness to resign and take all responsibility, hoping not to implicate others. President Chung coldly tossed out a sentence, "You're both fired." He then strode away. In the Human Resources office, several colleagues, upon hearing the news, gathered around to complain on Manager Wang's behalf that it was clearly young Master Tang who arranged for his little girlfriend to get in. Why should you be the one to leave? Suddenly, someone remembered that their colleague Zhong Ziqin was best friends with President Cheng's fiancée, so they asked her to help plead with President Chung for the manager. However, Zhong Ziqin didn't want to get involved in this mess, whether it was young Master Tang or President Chung. She didn't want to offend either of them, nor could she afford to. Therefore, she angrily directed her blame at Jiang Qingli that it's all that vixen's fault. She wanted to climb the social ladder and ended up implicating our HR department. Sure enough, the colleagues immediately nodded in agreement. Unbeknownst to them, a figure stood behind the two. This person was Jiang Qingli. She deliberately pushed the two of them forcefully to the sides, then calmly walked through the middle, introducing herself with a cold smile. "Hello, everyone. My name is Vixen, the one you were just cursing." Zhong Ziqin was immediately angered by her arrogant attitude. Ignoring the manager's attempts to stop her, she burst out cursing. "You caused Manager Wang to lose his job, and you still have the nerve to come here. Truly a shameless vixen." However, Jiang Qingli calmly explained, "I'll be transferred to a position that doesn't require an interview. It seems you haven't latched onto young Master Tang's golden thigh tightly enough. In this company, President Chung has the final say. If you know what's good for you, you'll get lost quickly." The repeated taunts instantly dispelled the guilt in Jiang Qingli's heart. She decided to stop pretending to be a vixen or a white lotus and revealed her true, rebellious nature. She retorted without hesitation, "You're right. I will work hard to become the president's wife." Zhong Ziqin was so angry she could barely speak. "You're shameless. President Cheng's fiancée is my best friend, the daughter of the Xia group, Xia Jinxiao. What are you?" Calmly watching the other party rant and rave like a buffoon. Jiang Qingli suddenly curled her lips into a playful smile, thinking, "Make a scene. It's best if it reaches Xia Jinxiao." It was getting really boring to always be performing a one-woman show. In the evening, after work, President Chung was wondering why someone was cleaning the men's restroom at this hour. The cleaning staff should have already gone home. He came face to face with Jiang Qingli in a cleaner's uniform, holding a mop in one hand and a bucket in the other. Seeing the man, Jiang Qingli immediately greeted him with a bright smile. But President Chung was so shocked he was a bit stunned. Then, the man immediately adopted the stern attitude of reprimanding a subordinate that "I told you to leave. Don't you understand? Besides, you have a degree from a prestigious university. Is it just to scrub toilets here?" For revenge, she actually seduced her enemy's fiancé, even casting aside her dignity as a master's degree holder, to work as a cleaner in the man's company. Who would have thought she was just properly cleaning a toilet when the aggressive man almost forced himself on her? It turned out that, after work hours tonight, President Chung had accidentally run into Jiang Qingli cleaning the men's restroom. He had thought Jiang Qingli was just a gold digger who used her beauty to take shortcuts. However, when he accidentally glimpsed the obvious scrapes on her face and hands, he couldn't help but wonder, is this woman really just after company's secrets to be sticking by his side? But the next second, Jiang Qingli suddenly spoke up. "Senior, if you can't hold it, you can go to the women's restroom next door. Anyway, the last time we..." Hearing this, President Cheng's face instantly darkened. He was fed up with this vixen's endless seductions and her constant mentioning of those bold and awkward incidents. So, he irritably lifted her onto the wash basin. "Jiang Qingli, Let me tell you, I've seen plenty of playthings like you that can be bought off with money. So you better stop. Sorry, but in Jiang Qingli's dictionary, the words stop before you go too far don't exist. She only knows to get revenge as soon as possible. So she suddenly hooked her arms around the man's neck and even rubbed her nose against his cheek. Senior, are you having a hard time holding back? Let me help you solve your physical needs. President Chung was stunned. His cold eyes were involuntarily tinged with a faint desire. At the same time, Jiang Qingli's slender fingers traveled down the man's body. But unexpectedly, this time the man didn't stop her and even swallowed uncontrollably. Just as she was about to reach a certain sensitive area, Jiang Qingli suddenly jumped off the wash basin. She bent over and held up the toilet brush. Senior, I'll immediately brush you up a little pond. Only then did President Chung realize he had been played. His eyes almost popped out of his head with anger. Jiang Qingli suddenly brought her face close, admiring the man's angry expression from a close distance, secretly delighted. You call me a plaything, didn't you? How does it feel to be played by a plaything? However, President Chung, suddenly enraged, dragged her to the innermost stall. Then he violently threw her onto the toilet, holding her panicked little face. To get back at her, he didn't hesitate to warn her viciously. Do you really think I wouldn't dare to do something to you? Soon, after Jiang Qingli composed herself, she immediately put on a bright smile and retorted, Senior, can you let me see what you mean by something? As she spoke, she actually took the initiative to rub her leg against the man's. President Cheng's hand unconsciously moved from the woman's smooth face down along her delicate collarbone. Suddenly, he heard Tang Yang's anxious shout, Qingli, are you there? President Chung was instantly startled. He hastily straightened his clothes and strode out. He ran right into his nephew who had come to find his girlfriend. Uncle, have you seen Qingli? President Cheng's heart pounded with guilt at the question, his eyes darting around, not knowing how to answer. Just then, the sound of a heavy object falling came from the stall. Tang Yang immediately rushed in and saw his girlfriend passed out on the floor of the innermost stall. And on the floor lay an overturned bottle of cleaning agent. His mind instantly went blank, not knowing what to do. It was President Chung who came in after him and immediately realized it might be poisoning from the cleaning agent. So he quickly told his nephew to open the window for ventilation and then call for an ambulance. Seeing Tang Yang run to open the window without a second thought, he was instantly speechless. Nephew, you should at least drag her out before opening the window. Helpless, he could only carry her outside. However, after just a few steps, Jiang Qingli in his arms mischievously opened her eyes and even gave President Chung a thank you kiss behind her boyfriend's back. Being played by the same woman twice in a row, President Cheng's head throbbed with anger. However, Jiang Qingli just giggled, her hand restlessly traveling down the man's back, finally patting his firm buttocks. Aren't you afraid I'll throw you down right now? You wouldn't bear to. Besides, Tang Yang is here. Jiang Qingli had been smug for less than 3 seconds before she was ruthlessly thrown to the ground. The pain made her curse the dog man 300 times in her heart. Hearing the noise, Tang Yang quickly ran over, anxiously holding his girlfriend and comforting her for a while. At this point, Jiang Qingli had skillfully switched to her weak, white flower persona. I'm sorry for causing trouble for President Chung. I will definitely do my job as a cleaner well, as long as I can stay. She paused halfway through her sentence. Only when she saw President Chung nervously purse his lips did she smile with satisfaction. She continued, as long as I can stay by Tang Yang's side, I'm willing to do anything. Hearing this, President Cheng's eyes darkened, and he coldly ordered her to report to the Secretarial Department tomorrow. The pitiful little white lotus is her. The bold and seductive vixen is also her. She played the part of her nephew's weak little girlfriend while seducing her boyfriend's uncle. She even took the initiative to kiss him behind her boyfriend's back, not wanting his nephew to be played for a fool. President Cheng's eyes darkened as he announced that Jiang Qingli would work in the Secretarial Department, so he could monitor her every move. Who would have thought that this would only make the vixen even more audacious? Just now, as soon as he returned to the office, President Chung immediately instructed Assistant Chun in a deep voice to keep a close eye on Jiang Qingli's every move from now on. After giving his instructions, he accidentally noticed the hand cream on the desk. It was said to be a very effective new product from abroad. After a moment's hesitation, he hesitantly asked Assistant Chun to also give the hand cream to her, telling her to get rid of the smell of disinfectant on her. Although he didn't name names, Assistant Chin immediately guessed he was talking about Jiang Qingli. Amidst the gossip of her colleagues, Jiang Qingli appeared in the secretarial office, carrying a box of personal belongings. And that tube of hand cream was deliberately placed on top in the most conspicuous spot. So what if they called her a glamorous gold digger? She couldn't be bothered to deal with these boring women. The person she was dealing with today was Xia Jinxiao's best friend, Zhong Ziqin, a woman with a small chest and no brain. Sure enough, Zhong Ziqin arrogantly blocked her way, questioning where she got the hand cream. Jiang Qingli pretended to look guilty, stammering that she bought it herself. Hearing this, Zhong Ziqin became extremely smug, her voice involuntarily rising. This is a new product that was just launched in the North American market last week. President Cheng's fiancée happened to give me a box. I don't remember giving you a tube. Could it be that you stole this from me? Believing she had caught Jiang Qingli red-handed, Zhong Ziqin's attitude became increasingly arrogant, attracting the attention of the surrounding colleagues. Jiang Qingli immediately changed her story, explaining that she didn't steal anything. It was a gift from a friend. But Zhong Ziqin wouldn't listen, insisting that she was a thief. She even knocked the cardboard box out of her hands, sending it crashing to the floor, claiming she was checking for other stolen goods. Jiang Qingli immediately let out a cry. Then she threw herself to the floor, only caring about picking up a bright red flyer, looking heartbroken as if she had lost some treasure. Zhong Ziqin immediately noticed this strange reaction. Out of curiosity, she quickly snatched the flyer. One look and she was stunned. It was a promotional photo of President Cheng speaking at a university alumni event. She instantly flew into a rage. This vixen isn't satisfied with latching onto young Master Tang. She's even trying to seduce President Cheng. The crowd was in an uproar. They didn't expect such a young girl to do something like this. Exactly. So shameless. Amidst the accusations of her colleagues, Jiang Qingli looked like a pitiful little thing, her eyes filled with tears, tightly clutching the promotional photo. She was waiting for someone to appear. Finally, the commotion in the office successfully attracted President Cheng. Zhong Ziqin eagerly rushed to be the first to complain. She stole the hand cream that Jin Xiao sent me from abroad. We have the stolen goods and the thief, enough to call the police and arrest her. Now is the time, Jiang Qingli thought. The wrong tears in her eyes instantly gushed out, and she timidly clarified for herself, I really didn't steal it. Zhong Ziqin is trying to take something very important from me. After speaking, she lowered her gaze to the promotional photo in her arms. At the same time, President Cheng's gaze unconsciously shifted to the photo. When he saw that the person in the photo was himself, the man's pupils constricted in shock. Then he spoke coldly, that hand cream, I had Assistant Chun give it to her. For a tube of hand cream, you caused a scene in the office without even checking the facts. Go to the HR department and handle your resignation. The man shot a cold glance at Zhong Ziqin. A trace of fear instantly rose in her heart, and the words of pleading were swallowed back down. After dealing with the troublemaker, President Cheng was about to announce his decision regarding Jiang Qingli. However, when he accidentally glanced at her hand, which she had just scraped and was now bleeding, the man's mind suddenly went blank. He even uncontrollably took a few steps back. Fortunately, Assistant Chen immediately guessed the reason, quickly supported him, and thoughtfully reminded him that it was time for the conference call. Only then did President Cheng hastily leave in a less than dignified manner, leaving Assistant Chen to clean up the mess. As soon as President Cheng returned to his office, before he could recover from his faintness at the sight of blood, he received a call from his fiancée, Xia Jinxiao, demanding an explanation. He was already extremely impatient with this woman, and now he couldn't be bothered to deal with her. So he just hung up the phone. As he looked up, he accidentally noticed someone eavesdropping outside the door. Without even thinking, there was only one person in the entire company bold enough to do that. It was Jiang Qingli. And Jiang Qingli, outside the door, realizing she had been discovered, simply pushed the door open and walked in. It was obvious she had specially dressed up and even put on rose-scented perfume. However, President Cheng just stared blankly at her injured hand. Noticing the man's gaze, Jiang Qingli immediately bounced over, cheerfully saying that her hand was fine and it definitely wouldn't affect her ability to serve tea and water. Suddenly, she playfully rubbed against the man's thigh. and jumped into his lap, teasing him coquettishly. Do you want to try my special skill? She had boldly barged into her boyfriend's uncle's office and was now blatantly teasing him, nestled affectionately in the uncle's lap. Oh, you want to try my special skill? However, President Cheng's face darkened, and he coldly questioned, did you take Zhang Ziqin's hand cream? Jiang Qingli's expression froze for a moment. Then, she immediately put on a wronged, innocent look. This has nothing to do with me. I hurt my hand just now trying to get your promotional photo back. Her pitiful little look would have charmed any other man. But President Cheng was completely unmoved. He opened the surveillance footage from the restroom entrance. In the footage, Zhang Ziqin entered the restroom in the morning with a tube of hand cream. 25 seconds later, Jiang Qingli, in a cleaner's uniform, happened to come out of the restroom. Just 5 seconds later, Zhang Ziqin couldn't find her hand cream. After playing the footage, President Cheng continued to question the vixen on his LAP, and no one else entered or left the restroom in between. You still dare to say this has nothing to do with you? I didn't. If you don't believe me, Senior, you can search me yourself. After saying that, she leaned confidently against the desk, striking a pose that better accentuated her figure. After a moment of thought, President Cheng immediately realized he had been used. This woman had actually used him to get rid of Zhang Ziqin. Suddenly, he stood up abruptly, closing in on her step by step. You already knew Zhang Ziqin was Xia Jinqiao's person, so you went to great lengths to put on this show. What are you really after? Seeing Jiang Qingli remain silent, he suddenly lifted the woman's chin, his eyes filled with a deep meaning. He threatened her forcefully. If you don't tell the truth, I'll dislocate your jaw and make your face longer than a loofah. Actually, Jiang Qingli was not at all surprised by Cheng Yu's reaction. She had long heard of this man's shrewd and forceful nature. As a powerless person, since she dared to come to him to take revenge on his fiancée, she had naturally made thorough preparations in advance. In this round, she, Jiang Qingli, was sure to win. At this moment, she was like a frightened little rabbit, her face pleading weakly, but her words continued to seduce. Senior, be gentle. Don't you feel bad for me? It hurts. Just then, Assistant Chen suddenly knocked and entered, walking in on this indescribable scene. Wow, is this something a little assistant like him can watch for free? The assistant, blushing, quickly retreated. President Cheng anxiously shouted, while only Jiang Qingli was secretly laughing. After calling the assistant back, President Cheng cleared his throat tactically a couple of times to cover his embarrassment. Just now, I was actually asking about the hand cream. Adhering to the principle of not prying into the boss's private affairs, the assistant suppressed his budding curiosity and reported formally. Just now, the cleaner found a tube of hand cream in the gap under the wash basin. Judging from the packaging, it should be Zhang Ziqin's. After hearing this, a thought flashed through President Cheng's mind. Could this also be part of Jiang Qingli's calculation? So, after the assistant left, he tentatively asked if this matter was really... Before he could finish his question, Jiang Qingli suddenly slammed the table and burst into tears. I like you so much. How could you? How could you casually slander me? President Cheng had never seen such a scene and was stunned. Who would believe that a vixen bold enough to barge into a strange man's bathroom and proactively kiss her boyfriend's uncle would suddenly burst into tears like a child, without any regard for her image? President Cheng was so thrown off that he began to doubt his life. What did I say just now that was so out of line? It seems I didn't. When Zhang Ziqin framed Jiang Qingli for stealing the hand cream, not only did I help clarify, but I also fired Zhang Ziqin. Now I just feel that the whole thing is a bit strange, so I casually asked the question. I didn't say anything else. Why? Why did you start crying? President Cheng's first reaction was to cover the woman's mouth, while fiercely warning, shut up. Do you want to attract the entire office? Looking down, he saw Jiang Qingli nodding with teary eyes, as if she had suffered a great injustice. He couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. For the first time in his life, he questioned whether his forceful methods were correct. As an inexplicable sense of guilt welled up in his heart, he immediately removed the hand covering her mouth. However, Jiang Qingli just smiled. Suddenly, she yanked the man's shirt, preparing to kiss him. But President Chung had already developed a conditioned reflex to her sudden kisses. Before his brain could even react, his hand had already shot up to block her. But Jiang Qingli didn't care about that. She simply planted a heavy kiss on the man's palm. Calling a compensation, President Cheng's expression froze instantly. He should have known she was just a little vixen. What was he feeling guilty about? Just as the man was about to say something more, a phone suddenly rang. Jiang Qingli, acting very familiar, proactively handed the phone to the man. With an obedient little expression, she forcefully interrupted his lecture. President Chung glanced at the caller ID and saw it was his mother. He took a deep breath and then irritably instructed Jiang Qingli to go with him to see an important client tomorrow and to get the details from Assistant Shun. Then he quickly told her to leave. After she left, he answered his mother's call. As soon as it connected, he was met with a barrage of scolding. Au, what is wrong with you? How could you argue with Jin Xiao? How are your father and I supposed to face the Xia family? And how are you supposed to face them? Without listening, he already knew what his mother would say next. His eyes instantly dimmed. He clearly detested Xia Jin Xiao. Yet because of what happened back then, he got engaged to her and even allowed her to plant spies in his company. Who knew that repeated compromises and concessions would only be met with her relentless pressure? He angrily clenched his fists, impatiently ending the call. Suddenly, he looked down and stared blankly at his hand. On his broad palm, a woman's lipstick print was clearly visible. He unconsciously smiled. This little vixen was full of lies, but one thing was an indisputable fact. Her lips were very soft, very sweet, and had a faint scent of roses. The next day, in a private room at a hotel, President Chung, alone with Jiang Qingli, met with a top European artificial intelligence expert, Dr. Jason, and his young daughter, Jessica. Her task was to take care of Jessica during the cooperation talks. Jiang Qingli quickly and smilingly presented the small gift she had prepared in advance. Don't worry, President Chung. I'm the best at making children happy. You just focus on winning over the doctor, and I'll take care of his daughter. Hearing this, President Chung immediately gave her an appreciative look. A moment later, the bearded doctor pushed open the door, accompanied by an adorable little girl in a modified Hanfu. President Chung quickly stood up to greet them warmly, exchanging a few pleasantries with the doctor in Chinese. And Jessica stared blankly at the smiling, beautiful older sister. After a moment, Jessica finally overcame her shyness, ran forward, and excitedly took Jiang Qingli's hand, complimenting her beauty in English. But she was stopped by the doctor, who said it was too superficial and she should use Chinese etiquette to greet them. Jessica obediently said, "Oh." Then she smiled and made a proper fist and palm salute to the two of them, introducing herself in a clear voice in English. "Hello, my name is Jessica." Despite the small surprise, what surprised President Chung the most was that the little vixen could actually speak fluent English. Jiang Qingli knelt down and gently replied to the adorable little girl in English. "It's a pleasure. Shall I greet you with your etiquette as well?" With that, she slowly lifted Jessica's small hand and performed a standard hand kiss. She used all her tricks to get close to her enemy's fiancé, whether it was the forbidden kiss in the restroom or the teasing in the office. The man was like an ascetic monk, vehemently refusing. She thought he would be so hard to handle. Who would have thought that a crystal music box for a child could scare the man into falling right into her arms? It turns out he was just a weakling with a tough exterior. It almost made her break her brainless vixen persona, just to win the man's favor. Today, for the first time, Jiang Qingli showed off her fluent English in front of President Chung. She also enthusiastically invited the doctor's little daughter to go to the hotel lobby to see the exhibition of Eastern culture. This way, President Chung could focus on discussing the cooperation with the doctor. And Jessica, influenced by her father, had always been very interested in the mysterious Eastern culture. Now, hearing that there was an exhibition to see, the little cutie immediately clamored to go right away. After getting Dr. Jason's permission, Jiang Qingli left the private room, carrying the gift bag in one hand and holding Jessica's hand in the other. While President Chung and Dr. Jason were discussing the smart cooperation, they faintly heard someone playing the guzheng. The music was clear and the melody was melancholic. Dr. Jason's attention was instantly captivated. Seeing this, President Chung suggested they go out and have a look. So the two of them followed the sound to a corner of the hotel lobby. From a distance, they saw Jiang Qingli sitting in front of guzheng. as her slender fingers skillfully flew up and down the strings. The clear sound of the instrument flowed out like a clear spring. Immersed in the melody, Jiang Qingli seemed like a different person, less of her usual seductiveness and more tranquility and elegance. When the piece ended, Dr. Jason couldn't help but applaud, while President Chung was stunned. He never expected that a vixen who only knew how to seduce people could actually play the guzheng. And when Jessica saw her father, she immediately held up her gift and bounced over to show it off. "This is the beautiful music box the pretty sister gave me. Isn't it beautiful? If the daughter likes it, the father is certainly happy." At this moment, Jiang Qingli smiled and stepped forward to explain, "The doctor won a patent last year for his creative, smart musical instruments. President Chung is very optimistic about this area, so he specially chose this music box today." After speaking, she didn't forget to give President Chung a smug little look. "About that? I gave you enough face, right?" Although President Chung was a bit annoyed by her arrogant look, he wasn't stupid enough to expose her on the spot. Instead, he asked Jessica in a friendly tone if she liked the gift. Jessica quickly held the music box up high and replied in a sweet, childish voice that she liked it very much. President Chung was momentarily dazed, and just at that moment, Jessica turned on the music box. A melodious tune instantly came from the crystal glass cover, and snowflakes floated inside. In an instant, President Cheng's eyes widened, his body trembling from extreme fear. Suddenly, his mind went black, and his whole body began to sway uncontrollably. Noticing that something was wrong, Jiang Qingli immediately ran over anxiously to support him. But soon, President Chung still fell into a coma. In his daze, he seemed to have returned to that snowy field and the SOS written in blood on the snow. The feeling of despair, terror, and helplessness was suffocating him. Suddenly, he woke up with a start. He found that his shirt was wide open. At the same time, Jiang Qingli, who was watching over him, noticed the movement. She quickly leaned over, blinking her sincere eyes, and said with concern, "The doctor just said you fainted suddenly due to excessive heart palpitations. Your temperature kept rising. Luckily, I kept wiping your upper body with cold water to cool you down." As she spoke, her restless fingers roamed over the man's firm abs. President Chung quickly pushed the woman's hand away in a panic. "I know. I can handle the rest myself. You can go back now." However, Jiang Qingli was deliberately disobedient. Instead, she suddenly pushed him back onto the bed and leaned over, pressing the man down beneath her. "The doctor said you must rest in bed. Assistant Chun specifically asked me to stay and take care of you." Hearing this, President Chung clenched his fists in shame and anger. Very good. Chun-Ling can forget about his bonus for the next 10 years. Hearing that Dr. Jason had agreed to the cooperation, the man was slightly taken aback, wondering if she had managed to secure the deal all by herself. Taking advantage of the man's confused state, Jiang Qingli once again caressed his firm chest. Suddenly, she lightly touched his nose with hers. The air instantly felt like it had been heated to the ceiling. "President Chung, why don't you reward me? Let me help you wipe the rest." After speaking, her hand followed the man's tense, hot muscle lines, traveling all the way down. At this moment, the man's eyes were deep and bright, yet tinged with heavy desire. She actually took the initiative to seduce her enemy's fiancé. The first time failed. The second time failed again. The third time failed yet again. This time, she decided to go for something more drastic. Her hand followed the man's tense, hot muscle lines, traveling all the way down. At this moment, the man's eyes were deep and bright, yet tinged with heavy desire. Just as her hand was about to slip in, President Chung suddenly jolted and grabbed her hand. He sternly warned her to behave. However, Jiang Qingli was not bothered at all, instead smiling even more brightly. Seeing the woman's practice movements, President Chung immediately thought that this must not be the first time she had done something so outrageous. Thinking of the men before him, a nameless anger surged in the man's chest. He asked through gritted teeth, "Before me, how many companies did you take down with this trick?" But Jiang Qingli was not a truly naive girl. Rather than being caught in a lie, it was better to confess that she had only ever worked as a makeup sales consultant. Obviously, President Chung didn't believe a single word that a sales consultant. How could a sales consultant have the ability to secure a patent contract on her own? As soon as he finished speaking, a cold tear dripped onto the man's hand. President Chung was stunned. He looked up and saw Jiang Qingli's fair cheeks covered in strings of tears. She then burst out crying loudly. So, in your heart, I'm just a woman who sleeps her way to the top. Do you know that for this meeting, I stayed up day and night memorizing client information and went to great lengths to pick a gift to please the client? Just now, to take care of you. I didn't even change my clothes and was half frozen on the way here. The more agitated she became, the more fiercely her tears flowed. President Chung was so flustered he was stunned, not knowing what to say in his panic. Just as he was about to apologize and ask her to stop crying, Jiang Qingli was the first to run out while crying, giving him no chance to apologize, because only guilt makes one remember. With a heavy slam of the door, President Chung was as helpless as a child who had done something wrong, his heart in turmoil, his mind filled with the image of the tear-streaked little vixen. After a moment's hesitation, he cursed, troublesome, under his breath in annoyance, quickly grabbed the suit jacket from the side of the bed, and chased after her. He chased her all the way to the building entrance and saw from a distance a man putting a coat on Jiang Qingli. He also patted the woman's head, his eyes gentle, his actions intimate, like a close couple. Then, Jiang Qingli even got in the man's car and left. President Cheng's face instantly darkened, and he angrily clenched the jacket in his hand. It seemed he had underestimated this vixen's methods of seducing men all along. He immediately, and very unhappily, called Assistant Chun and instructed him to quickly investigate someone's detailed information. In a private room at a high-end bar, President Chung was drinking sullenly, one glass after another. His friend saw this and couldn't help but tease, "Did you fight with Xia Zhenxiao? Women just need a little coaxing." But his mood only grew more sullen. If it were Xia Zhenxiao, he couldn't be bothered. After finishing a glass, he slammed it heavily on the table. Just then, he looked up and suddenly saw Tang Yang pushing the door open with a triumphant air. He was a bit surprised. Why was someone who was still on a business trip back early? "I finished all my work, so I changed my flight and came back early," Tang Yang answered, a little embarrassed. Anyone could tell that this love-struck boy was 9 times out of 10 back for his girlfriend. The crowd started to jeer, asking him to call the young lady out so the guys could have a look. Tang Yang simply waved his hand and proudly announced, "It's too late today. Tomorrow afternoon, my treat, how about it?" Just as he finished speaking, President Chung couldn't help but give his foolish nephew a meaningful glare, teasing him sarcastically, "It is late. At this hour, she probably doesn't lack company." To be suddenly grabbed by her boyfriend's uncle and pushed into the car for a taxi cab tryst. What is this situation? She had failed every time she took the initiative to seduce the man. Now that she was doing nothing, the man took the initiative to come to her onto her. This also happened to prove what President Chung himself had just said. It's so late. Jiang Qingli probably doesn't lack a man to take care of her. As soon as he spoke, the atmosphere in the private room instantly froze. And Tang Yang was instantly enraged by this sarcastic taunt. The love-struck boy wouldn't allow anyone to speak ill of his girlfriend. However, President Chung just frowned irritably, without the slightest hint of apology or remorse. As the uncle and nephew stared each other down over a woman, it was a friend who immediately jumped in to mediate and ease the tension. "Young Master Tang, calm down, calm down. Your uncle has had too much to drink." However, before the anger in Tang Yang's chest could subside, President Chung actually stood up, walked over to him, and warned him coldly from above, "That woman is not simple. Be careful not to play with fire and get burned." Listen to that. It was as if he was afraid his nephew wasn't angry enough, adding fuel to the fire. Tang Yang couldn't sit still anymore. He yelled at President Cheng's departing back. "Qingli is not that kind of person. I'll have her come over right now to prove it to you." And President Chung, who had left the private room, was in an even more foul mood. He simply sat at the downstairs bar and continued to drink sullenly. His movement of raising the glass suddenly paused. Then his gaze unconsciously shifted to the open phone screen on the table. On the phone screen was the profile of a man. It was the man who had picked up Jiang Qingli tonight. Qin Shuha, an elegant and mature, unmarried university professor. He immediately thought of Tang Yang, a young, rich playboy, plus himself, a mature older man. Jiang Qingli, this vixen, was actually stringing along 3 different types of men at the same time. Did she think she was collecting stamps? At this thought, a surge of anger rose in him. He suddenly slammed the glass in his hand onto the counter. At this moment, a clear voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Alone? Handsome? He was stunned for 0.01 seconds, then immediately turned his head. He saw a blonde beauty smiling and leaning in. In terms of looks and figure, she was in no way inferior to Jiang Qingli, but a faint disappointment, which he himself didn't even notice, showed in his eyes. But while the man was stunned, the blonde woman secretly dropped a pill into his drink. At this point, President Cheng's mood was already at its most irritable. He didn't notice this small action at all, just told her to get lost with a dark face. The blonde woman had never met such an unappreciative man. She really suspected if this man was gay. So she turned and left in a huff. But not long after finishing a glass of wine, President Cheng's body felt like it had been set on fire. It was so hot. Gradually, even his vision became blurry. He immediately realized that the woman just now had drugged him. Damn it, if that's the case, her accomplices must be lurking nearby, ready to ambush him. To keep himself awake, President Cheng steeled himself and smashed the wine glass. With the pain from the shards cutting his palm, he barely held on to his last shred of sanity, staggering out. Just then, Jiang Qingli happened to get out a taxi. She was still wondering why Tang Yang would ask her to come to a bar so late. However, the moment she looked up, she was stunned. She saw President Cheng staggering out of the bar. His cheeks were an unnatural shade of red, and the man's palm was bleeding. Seeing this, Jiang Qingli thought, is this grown man going to faint at the sight of blood again? She stood lunged up by the car, still considering whether to walk past as if she saw nothing or to smile and continue to be friendly to his cold face. But unexpectedly, President Cheng suddenly rushed forward, pinning her against the car door. A sweet fragrance from the woman's body instantly rushed into his nose. The man gradually relaxed his tense self, deciding to follow his instinct for desire. So he pushed her down into the back seat. Not to mention Jiang Qingli was startled. Even the taxi driver, who had seen all sorts of strange scenes, was jaw-droppingly shocked. Suddenly, President Cheng waved his hand, throwing a wad of cash. He ordered him out of the car, breathing heavily. Although Jiang Qingli wanted to seduce Cheng Yu, when it really came to this, being inexperienced, she was both shocked and scared. At the same time, her mind raced. The result was speechless. Those cliché dramas never had this taxi cab tryst scene. She actually dared to threaten her boyfriend's uncle to take responsibility. Oh no, that's fine. She can still call her boyfriend over to see how he was being entangled by the prim and proper uncle in a taxi cab tryst. Although it was a fact that President Cheng was drugged, it was also a fact that she was pushed into the taxi. Suddenly, President Cheng waved his hand, throwing a wad of cash to the driver in the front seat. Breathing heavily, he ordered him out of the car. Not to mention the driver, who had seen all sorts of strange things, was shocked. Even Jiang Qingli, this little vixen, wanted to die of embarrassment on the spot. However, on second thought, this was a great opportunity to undermine her enemy. So she awkwardly signaled the driver to get out and have a smoke before coming back. After the person got out, watching the man's eyes gradually become hazy and intoxicated, his cheeks flushed with acute pink, Jiang Qingli felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction. The thrill of pulling a cold, lofty flower into her embrace. Who can understand it? Seeing the man's misty eyes, as if pleading for something. She knew exactly what he wanted, but she deliberately didn't let him get his wish so quickly. Who was to blame for rejecting her so many times when she took the initiative to seduce him? He had his pride, and so did she. Her slender fingers gently circled, caressing the man's bobbing Adam's apple. Then she traveled down along his hot muscles, deliberately slowing down to unbutton his shirt. And then she suddenly fell onto the car seat with a thud. And then there was nothing driving the man crazy. President Cheng really couldn't take it anymore. Suddenly, a hot, domineering kiss pressed on her soft lips, teasing and lingering in her mouth. It stirred until the moment before suffocation, then reluctantly moved away. The man's desire-filled breaths, deep and shallow, stirred the ambiguous air in the car. After just catching his breath, President Chung immediately couldn't control himself and lowered his head, biting her slender neck. To hell with etiquette, to hell with moral constraints. At this moment, the man just wanted to let go and chase the true desires of his heart. Just then, Jiang Qingli's phone rang, suddenly breaking the ambiguous atmosphere in the car. She picked up her phone and looked. The caller was her boyfriend, Tang Yang. Hearing his nephew's name, President Cheng's body unconsciously stiffened, his mind instantly clearing. Since things had already gotten to this uncontrollable point, the only thing to do now was to have Jiang Qingli break up with his nephew as soon as possible. But this was not the outcome Jiang Qingli wanted. She wanted President Chung to break up with her enemy, Xia Jinxiao, first. As soon as she finished speaking, President Chung helplessly pulled away and put on his clothes. He didn't hide anything, nor did he explain, just told her to name her price. However, the little vixen skillfully switched to her pitiful white flower persona. I don't have any experience in negotiations. I'd better have Tang Yang come over and help me negotiate a good price. Using the most wrong tone to deliver the most forceful threat, President Chung was truly anxious. Himunda pulled her over, Ba Dao Di, Tu Chu Languito, don't you dare. But Jiang Qingli just smiled smugly, becoming even more audacious and turning the tables. She suddenly brought her face close, forcing the man to lean back. Senior, what do you mean by don't you dare? Do you mean I'm not allowed to do this? With that, her hand traveled up the man's tense thigh muscles as she looked at his intoxicated and alluring expression. A complex look flashed through the man's eyes. She wanted to resist, but couldn't, and in the end, she could only surrender to a long kiss. Meanwhile, Tang Yang was anxiously stomping his foot because his girlfriend wasn't answering her phone. He happened to spot a driver in a corner. So, in a love-struck daze, he immediately pulled out a 2,000 yuan bill and asked for a ride. Damn, what's with tonight? It's just one bad thing after another. The driver's old heart, which had just calmed down, immediately started pounding wildly at the sight of the cash. He then gave a knowing look and explained, there are still customers in the car, having a party. You'll have to ask the customers if they're finished. I'll ask. With that, Tang Yang rushed toward the rideshare car the driver had pointed to. But the moment the car door was opened, he was instantly shocked, his pupils trembling. His foolish nephew's girlfriend, a pure little white lotus, was now as bold as a Category 20 typhoon. She recklessly toyed with his perennially tense nerves, wildly assaulting his disciplined rationality. President Chung had to admit, it was the first time he had lost control in front of a woman, and not just because of the drug. However, the moment Tang Yang opened the car door, he was instantly stunned. Had the sky fallen, or had the world gone mad? It was his uncle, his self-respecting, already engaged uncle. And that woman was being held tightly to his uncle's chest, treasured, as if he was afraid someone would see her. Get out. Hearing President Cheng's low growl, the stunned Tang Yang finally snapped back to reality. He quickly slammed the car door shut. At this moment, his uncle's friend, Xiao Xiao, also came out, wondering why young Master Tang was standing by the taxi and not getting in. Just then, President Chung got out of the car. His usually cold face had an unusual glint in his eyes. A bright red lipstick mark peeked out from the collar of his black shirt, clearly betraying the mischief he had just been up to. The driver, meanwhile, scurried over. Sir, you're finally done. President Chung immediately composed himself and told him to take the person back first. After the driver left, Tang Yang was hesitantly about to ask about the woman's identity. However, he looked up and met his uncle's don't ask gaze. The question on the tip of his tongue immediately changed to, I get it, little uncle, don't worry. I definitely won't tell Sister Qiao. After speaking, he even earnestly told Xiao not to run his mouth. Unexpectedly, President Chung coldly tossed out a whatever. This indifferent attitude instantly made Xiao's eyes darken, and he silently felt sorry for his goddess. Thus, he couldn't help but warn him not to let it happen again, and to never, ever hurt Xia Jinxiao. But President Chung couldn't be bothered to reply and simply turned and walked away. Watching the two of them leave, Xiao narrowed his eyes in displeasure. Something's not right. Very not right. Xingyu isn't an impulsive person. The problem must be the woman in the car. Meanwhile, after taking her 10th shower, Jiang Qingli was brushing her teeth for the 55th time. She didn't like seeing the marks on her body, and she hated herself even more for just texting Tang Yang to break up. Suddenly, an apologetic call from Tang Yang came through. Hearing the man's torrent of apologies, Xiao Li, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. I shouldn't have asked you to come out so late. Let's not break up, okay? A deep sense of guilt instantly welled up in Jiang Qingli's heart, but she quickly suppressed it. Tang Yang, we're not suitable for each other. Whether it's our status or family background, the gap between us is too big. I don't care. Really, Xiao Li, I like you. I really like you. I'm begging you. Before Tang Yang could finish, she steeled her heart and hung up the phone, then set it to silent. In the end, she had still hurt an innocent person. Now, she had become the kind of woman she despised the most. A hypocritical, pretentious, insidious, and cunning scumbag. If her sister were still alive, she would probably be very disappointed to see her like this. After all, her sister was so sincere, sunny, and kind. But why did such a good person have to die so tragically? Xia Jinxiao, the main culprit who was still at large, and all those accomplices. She was determined to drag them all to hell. That trace of guilt was instantly drowned in the furious flames of revenge. The next morning, her phone buzzed incessantly. She forced her sleepy eyes open to take a look. There were over 99 missed calls and texts, all from Tang Yang. Only the last text was from an unknown number. This is the municipal traffic police. Your friend Tang Yang was in a car accident. He kept calling your name before he lost consciousness. Please come to the hospital immediately. Her mind instantly snapped awake, a chill of fear rising in her heart. In the hospital, a large hand suddenly reached out to her. She immediately trembled in terror. When she was pinned down in a closed room, she actually, joyfully, threw herself into the other person's arms. Not because the man was handsome, nor for the immense power he held. It was only because he was the fiancé of her enemy. She had to avenge her sister, who died unjustly, but to get entangled with her boyfriend's uncle while still being his nephew's girlfriend. Who would have thought this man would be such a scoundrel, refusing to break up with his fiancé even after getting what he wanted? How could this be? You see, this morning, the reason she rushed to the hospital with guilt and concern was because she heard that Tang Yang, whom she had just broken up with last night, had gotten into a car accident. However, before she could even see the injured party, she was pushed down by President Cheng in a closed storage room. President Cheng irritably lifted her chin and demanded, "What exactly did you say to Tang Yang?" "Just that we were breaking up. What else could I say?" She was no truly naive girl. She had already thought it through. As long as President Cheng didn't leave Xia Jinxiao, she would obediently play the part of a brainless and compliant vixen. Hearing this, President Cheng immediately thought that Tang Yang's accident was because he had been dumped. His expression instantly became complicated. However, she took the opportunity to nestle pitifully into the man's arms. Half-truthfully, she confessed, regarding Tang Yang, "I hurt him. I will feel guilty for the rest of my life for this. But I still don't want to give you up. Don't worry, I will be very good and obedient." As she spoke, she slowly raised her misty eyes, intentionally revealing the marks under her silk scarf. It was the red marks from a scraping treatment, used to cover the ambiguous kiss marks from last night. President Cheng, who noticed it at a glance, was suddenly somewhat moved. Seeing this, she immediately continued with her 36 stratagems for a vixen in training. Her slender fingers massaged back and forth on the man's jaw. The prickly sensation gave her a jolt of surprise, as if she had discovered a new continent. The book says that if it was a man's first time last night, his beard will be especially prickly the next day. As soon as she finished, she saw President Cheng's body stiffen slightly. A blush of embarrassment at being found out unconsciously appeared on his cheeks. However, she was even more delighted and kissed the man's stubble. Suddenly, a firm and domineering kiss landed precisely on her soft lips. The man's heavy breathing stirred the ambiguous air. After the kiss, President Cheng didn't forget to whisper a warning. Read less of that nonsensical stuff. But the one being warned had a mischievous smile playing at the corners of her eyes. "Senior, you say you don't fall for my tricks, but you seem to enjoy them quite a bit." The usually righteous President Cheng was suddenly rendered speechless. She didn't press the issue further and waved a cool goodbye. She still planned to see Tang Yang with her own eyes to be truly at ease. Watching her leave, President Chung felt like he was finding it harder and harder to understand this woman's tactics. A little vixen who seemed very sensible, yet she didn't want money. At this moment, Xiao Xiao, who had just arrived at the hospital, happened to witness this scene. The thought of Chung Yu's repeated betrayal of Jin Xiao ignited a burst of anger. Without a word, he stepped forward and landed a heavy punch on his friend's face. That woman just now was the one from last night, wasn't she? So this is how you treat Jin Xiao. His friend's gaze made President Chung feel a bit suffocated. He quickly explained that he had been drugged last night. She had used her status as his nephew's girlfriend to actively seduce her boyfriend's uncle, and she actually succeeded. What bad intentions could she have? She just wanted to avenge her dead sister by seeking revenge on his uncle's fiancée. The only person she felt guilty towards was her boyfriend, Tang Yang, a playboy with numerous ex-girlfriends who would have thought he'd get into a car accident over her breaking up with him. Looking at Tang Yang still unconscious on the hospital bed, the guilt she had suppressed in her heart instantly erupted like a geyser. Now she was just a scheming bad woman, unworthy and undeserving. Just then, the unconscious Tang Yang happened to open his eyes. He immediately saw the worried face of Jiang Qingli. He shot up and excitedly grabbed her hand, desperately explaining, "Shaoli, I really like you for who you are. None of that family background or status stuff matters. Let's not break up, okay?" But Jiang Qingli immediately pulled her hand away. After hesitating for a long while, she finally decided to use the cruelest method to completely extinguish his hopes. So she untied the silk scarf she used for cover, revealing the scattered kiss marks that "I'm sorry, Tang Yang. I'm already with another man. Actually, I never liked you. From the very beginning, I approached you with ulterior motives. Tang Yang, get a grip. You need to take good care of yourself." With that, she pretended to turn and leave coolly and heartlessly, leaving Tang Yang stunned and in disbelief, as if struck by lightning. Then he thought that this might just be an excuse to break up. So he frantically shouted at her retreating back, "Shaoli, I don't believe you. Come back, let's talk it out, okay?" The more he shouted, the faster she walked. He simply got out of bed in his weakened state to chase after her. However, the person who left so heartlessly was actually already in tears. 1,000 or 10,000 apologies couldn't undo the harm she had caused. She only hoped that Tang Yang could forget her as soon as possible and start a new life. What she didn't know was that another person was also hurting because of her. It turned out that the perceptive Xiao Xiao had noticed that President Chung had another woman, and he was upset about the harm this caused his fiancée, Jin Xiao. But President Chung casually threw out a "this is between us" and then left coldly. This indifferent attitude successfully provoked Xiao Xiao's unrequited love. So he made a long-distance call directly to Xia Jin Xiao, who was abroad, to tattle.iu. I really can't live without you. Can you help me talk to him? You're the only one I have by my side now." After her weak and pitiful plea received a positive reply from Xiao Xiao, Xia Jin Xiao hung up the phone. Then she quickly dialed another number. She viciously ordered the person on the other end to investigate the woman around Changyu. Daring to compete with her, Xia Jin Xiao, for the position of Mrs. Chung, it seemed this woman was tired of living. Suddenly, a blond man covered in ambiguous marks skillfully hugged her from behind. "Unhappy, baby? I'll make you fly with joy right away. I believe you. Let's continue." While the fiancée was having a wild time abroad, her fiancé back home was heading to the company with a bruised face. Considering there was a video conference in the afternoon, Assistant Shin drove to a nearby pharmacy, planning to buy some ice packs for President Chung to reduce the swelling. However, President Chung unintentionally glanced and saw a familiar figure at the pharmacy entrance. So, without a second thought, he immediately got out of the car and walked over. He heard Jiang Qingli speaking on the phone in a familiar tone that "I want to buy some morning after pills, but there are too many kinds. I don't know which one is suitable." President Chung was suddenly stunned. He didn't expect the little vixen to proactively buy contraceptive pills. This strange bit of sensibility made him involuntarily take a few steps closer. Although he couldn't hear clearly what was said, he could distinctly make out a man's voice. Then Jiang Qingli obediently replied, Got it, don't worry. I know what to do." To be able to discuss such a private matter so openly with the other person, it was obvious that Jiang Qingli's relationship with that man was unusually close. This unexpected discovery made President Cheng's heart clench, wanting to ask, but his throat was too tight to get the words out. He could only slip back to the car, silently and irritably light up a cigarette, a habit he had quit long ago. After a short while, Jiang Qingli walked out of the pharmacy with a bag of medicine. She spotted the man at a glance and immediately bounced over happily, asking with a smile, "Senior, did you come here specially to pick me up?" Seeing the man didn't react, she boldly leaned in close, seductively whispering in a volume only the two of them could hear, "Senior, having had a taste of me, have you found it unforgettable?" However, President Chung saw her standard vixen-like my eyes, a stark contrast to her relaxed and natural demeanor on the phone just now. The man immediately, irritably, shoved her roughly into the car. Jiang Qingli, although not knowing what was wrong with this man today, knew her revenge plan was not yet complete, so she naturally had to work harder to seduce him. "Are you worried about me? That it's too tiring to squeeze onto the bus in high heels?" As she spoke, she suddenly leaned forward. She even took the initiative to untie her retied scarf, as if inviting someone to unwrap a sweet gift. Suddenly, a large hand pushed her face away. "Have some self-respect, or I'll throw you out of the car." Got it. I know my own weight. No need for you to remind me." Jiang Qingli could only sit back resentfully, cursing inwardly how this man could still be such a jerk. But what she found strangest was hearing that President Chung had forced Tang Yang out of the hospital to spend 15 days in the slammer. She had just curiously asked about it when he immediately shot her a cold look, asking sarcastically, "Are you heartbroken? One moment you're on the phone with this one, the next you're heartbroken over that one. You're quite busy with love." Oh, the man is jealous. A good sign. Jiang Qingli quickly hugged the man's arm, cooing and acting cute. "No one is as good or as handsome as Senior. From now on, I belong only to Senior." The man verbally warned her with disgust to stop with the sweet talk, but his handsome face, which was full of jealousy just a moment ago, now showed a visibly comfortable and pleased expression. At this moment, Jiang Qingli suddenly asked tentatively, "Senior, are you this impartial no matter who makes a mistake?" At the same time, she quietly waited for the man's reply, seeing the man fall into a thoughtful silence, without answering for a long time. It seemed there were exceptions to this impartiality. She suddenly lost the mood to know a fact she had already guessed. So, she immediately pretended to be relaxed and indifferent, saying she was just asking casually to actively go and seduce her enemy's fiancé. Since a direct approach couldn't make the scoundrel break up with his fiancé, then she didn't mind using a trick or two from the Vixen's Handbook. For example, saving a handsome young man in front of him, or adding a suitor's contact information on the spot. Isn't it thrilling? Isn't it exciting? To avenge her sister who died unjustly, she had already fallen deep into this disgusting scheme. Alone, she could be fearless, not even caring about her own life. Who would have thought that today, downstairs at the company, she would see people from Chelan Logistics clashing with the company security guards? And the figure of one of the Kick security guards seemed very familiar. As the guard's hat fell off, she was surprised to find that it was her childhood friend, Jin Yuan. She was stunned for a moment, then guessed that he had infiltrated Qingjin to help her. So she immediately and anxiously told the assistant to stop the car. She wanted to get out and see. Seeing her anxiously preparing to get out, President Chen quickly grabbed her. "Oh, you know him." As her eyes met the man's, which were filled with anger, her brilliant mind had already spun 8,000 times. Then she roared righteously, "Of course I know him. He's wearing our company's security uniform. Our own security guard is being bullied at our company's entrance. If word gets out, it's you, the great president, who will lose face. You just wait and see. Let me, a weak woman, handle this for you." As soon as she finished speaking, President Cheng's face instantly turned as black as the bottom of a pot. This woman wasn't even trying to hide it. It was obvious she wanted to use a public matter for private ends, to take the opportunity to curry favor with that pretty boy. As a man, if he really let a woman step in to help, that would be a true and utter loss of face. Therefore, President Chung sighed helplessly. Amidst her fawning calls of Senior is so handsome, the man gradually lost himself and, instead, righteously got out of the car to handle the situation. As soon as he got out, the assistant immediately shouted "Stop" to the crowd. They looked over and at a glance recognized the man standing behind the assistant as the great president of Qingjin, President Chung. Zhang Bailing, the one leading the trouble, immediately scurried over brother-in-law. I'm just cleaning house for you. A round of flattery was met with President Cheng's blunt rebuke. Don't call me brother-in-law. Your cousin and I aren't married yet. Besides, who gave you the guts to beat my security guard at Chungjin's entrance? This kid doesn't know his place. He dared to inspect my delivery van and even scratch my car. Look, after playing the victim, he pointed to the back door of the van. There was indeed a clear scratch on the door. But the beaten Jing Yuan immediately retorted defiantly. I was just conducting a routine vehicle check, and they started pushing me. My waist buckle is what scratched the car. Zhang Bailing, used to being arrogant, couldn't take it. Ignoring President Cheng's scolding, he rushed forward, ready to teach this brat another lesson. Just then, seeing the situation was not good, Jiang Qingli quickly rushed forward, stood in front of Jing Yuan, and with a smile, persuaded the other party not to get physical. This charming and lovely smile instantly made Zhang Bailing's eyes light up. His old habits immediately kicked in. He leaned in greasily, looking the unfamiliar young beauty up and down. He even struck what he thought was a handsome pose and introduced himself. My name is Zhang Bailing, the boss of Qilin Logistics. However, as soon as Jiang Qingli heard the name, an uncontrollable rage shot straight to her head. Zhang Bailing. Wasn't that Xia Jinxiao's damn cousin? No, now is not the time. She had to calm down first. Who would have thought that President Chung would suddenly rush forward and stand in front of her, successfully blocking Zhang Bailing's lecherous gaze? The great president shot a cold glare, and the lecher immediately gave a timid, silly laugh. For the little beauty's sake, brother-in-law, we'll let this matter go. But, little beauty, in light of my sincerity, would you do me the honor of adding my contact information? President Chung was about to refuse on her behalf, but Jiang Qingli beat him to it, nodding in agreement with a brilliant smile. President Chung, who had wanted to help, his face instantly darkened. He silently complained that this little vixen was probably not one to refuse anyone. After Zhang Bailing left with his men, hearing President Chung tell Jing Yuan in a businesslike manner to apply for workers' compensation from his supervisor, Jiang Qingli quickly volunteered to take him to the hospital for a full checkup first. Her worried expression made it hard not to suspect their relationship. The great president frowned coldly, unwilling to agree. But the little secretary pleaded with her eyes. Caught in the middle, the assistant's life was hard. In the end, the pitiful assistant had to take Jing Yuan to the hospital. Before leaving, he met Jing Yuan's worried eyes. Jiang Qingli secretly gave him a look, then silently mouthed 3 words, "Don't worry." Only then did she quickly catch up to the long legs of the scowling man. However, as soon as they entered the office, President Chung suddenly slammed the office door shut, leaned in, and fiercely questioned her about her true relationship with the security guard. Oh, has the sun risen from the west today? The scoundrel of a man was actually getting jealous over her. Not bad, not bad. A very good sign. As a reward for his jealousy, her slender hands suddenly wrapped around the man's neck, and she replied with a smile, "Childhood sweethearts." Who would have thought she would be arrogantly pushed away by the man? Fine. So he's forcing her to make a move, is he? The next second, her smile vanished, and she pretended to complain aggrievedly. "Senior, I gave you my first time, but why do you still not believe that I genuinely like you? Just yesterday, you were so passionate with me." Before she could finish talking about the absurd events in the taxi, President Chung, embarrassed and angry, cut her off. "Shut up. Just name your price." However, Jiang Qingli didn't answer directly. Instead, she pressed herself against him and replied, word by word, "The payment I want is you." While teasing him, her mischievous hand also squeezed the man's firm buttocks, making the man's face instantly flush red. Suddenly, he grabbed her by the waist, his breathing heavy, and lifted her horizontally onto the desk. After sweeping the desk clear, he leaned over and pressed her against the cold surface. "If you don't name a price, I'll just take it for free." Who would have thought that Jiang Qingli would suddenly push the man away and boldly challenge him back? Then I've gotten a great deal. The most expensive dinner in the world is a free one, because she wanted the man to immediately break up with his fiancée. That way, she could demand the blood debt for her unjustly deceased sister from his fiancée. However, the shrewd President Chung unilaterally announced that the money would be converted into a bonus and deposited into her salary account. Try to get rid of her with money. How could she, Jiang Qingli compromised so easily. So she decided to play hard to get, smiling as she increased the stimulation. Then I'll have to find a few more handsome young men. That way, I won't keep pestering just you. President Cheng's face instantly darkened. At first glance, that seemed to make some sense. But coming from this little vixen's mouth, it just felt strange. And he felt a strange discomfort in his heart. Then, as if carrying a little chick, he irritably ushered her out of the office. He told her to hurry up and get ready for the evening's banquet. Just then, President Cheng suddenly received a call from Xia Zhenxiao. He habitually wanted to hang up. However, after glancing at the little vixen behind him, he changed his mind. He answered the phone and even affectionately called out, "Ah Qiao." Hearing it was his enemy's call, Jiang Qingli's heart instantly exploded with rage. With a disgusted scowl, she immediately turned and walked away, leaving President Cheng to stare quizzically at her hastily retreating back, letting Xia Zhenxiao on the other end of the line talk to herself. Right now, the man's mind was filled with lewd thoughts about the little vixen. It was as if he could still smell a faint, elusive fragrance lingering in the air. He stared blankly into space, not knowing what nonsense his fiancée was saying. It wasn't until he heard the assistant's knock on the door that he suddenly snapped back to reality. He immediately and irritably ended the boring call. The assistant reported the freshly gathered investigation results in detail. It turned out that the woman who drugged him that night, Dai Wei, was a public relations manager at Outyin Group. And Outyin's boss, Su Ao, had been highly praised in the industry as an investment genius in recent years. Hearing this, President Cheng immediately slammed the file on the table. He exuded the domineering aura of a superior. What investment genius. To think his methods are so despicable. At tonight's banquet, I'll settle this score with him properly. The man's words were disdainful of her for losing face. But his body was very honest, thoughtfully covering her with his jacket. This left him, who had never been in a relationship, momentarily stunned. Did he succeed, or did he succeed? It turned out that Jiang Qingli had failed to seduce President Cheng. The scoundrel of a man had confidently guaranteed that he would make a stunning appearance at the banquet. This made the arrogant So slightly anticipate the little vixen's beautiful look. Even during his usual socializing, which he was best at, he was frequently distracted and made mistakes. The other boss wished him a happy new year, and he actually replied, "My pleasure, my pleasure." The person said, "Thanks for your patronage," and he still replied, "My pleasure, my pleasure." It was the long-suffering assistant who finally couldn't take it anymore, stepped forward, and forcibly interrupted his boss's night of "my pleasure, my pleasure." At this point, President Cheng finally couldn't hold back and pretended to casually ask where Jiang Qingli was. When told that she had just borrowed an evening gown and was on her way, the man disdainfully muttered, "Putting on airs." But his eyes were full of anticipation as he watched the entrance of the banquet hall. After waiting for a long time without seeing her, he impatiently ordered his assistant to inform Jiang Qingli that if she couldn't arrive within 10 minutes, she shouldn't bother coming at all. Meanwhile, due to a sudden downpour, the already crowded roads were at a complete standstill. In one of the stuck taxis, Jiang Qingli was constantly urging the driver, "Please, can you go a little faster?" The driver was getting annoyed by her urging. The distance wasn't far, but with the current traffic, it would take at least half an hour. Jiang Qingli was already feeling unwell from taking the morning after pill, and with the frustrating rain and traffic jam, her mood was indescribably foul. Just then, her phone suddenly received a message from Jing Yuan, a text saying he was safe, that it was just a minor injury and nothing serious. He even specifically cheered her on. What a fool, an absolute fool, knowing that her revenge plan was a fiery pit, yet he foolishly jumped in with her. Her gloomy mood was instantly dispelled by her childhood friend's support and encouragement. She even smiled and told the driver to stop, that she could walk the rest of the short distance. After getting out of the car, she realized the rain was much heavier than it looked from inside. Helplessly, without an umbrella, she could only rush towards the banquet in the heavy rain while calling the assistant to explain the situation. A woman carrying her high heels, running wretchedly in the heavy rain, yet it couldn't hide her exquisite features, like a princess in distress. Watching her, President Ao, sitting in his car, found himself unconsciously captivated. His subordinate in the same car, Dai Wei, immediately noticed something was off and asked what the president was looking at. Only then did President Ao come back to his senses, a playful smile on his lips, Nothing. Just looking at a princess in distress. The 10 minutes had long passed. President Chung hadn't left. Instead, he stood quietly in a corner with a wine glass. After an unknown amount of time, he heard a familiar voice. The man immediately looked up alertly. He saw Jiang Qingli holding her wide skirt, running over breathlessly. But he had to admit, today's little vixen was even more stunning. Looking down at the woman who was almost out of breath, the arrogant So mockingly said, "So this is your stunning appearance? If I relied on you, my reputation would be in the gutter." After catching her breath a little, Jiang Qingli retorted irritably. Who knew it would suddenly rain so heavily? The roads were jammed the whole way. I even ran here barefoot. As soon as she finished speaking, a man's suit jacket was thrown over, landing right on her head. She was stunned by this thoughtful gesture. Was he worried she would catch a cold from the rain? She saw President Chung unnaturally loosen his tie, his eyes avoiding hers as he told her to hurry up and clean herself up to avoid embarrassment. She immediately glared at him in annoyance, cursing inwardly that it was his mouth that needed a good cleaning in the restroom. To actively approach her enemy's fiancé, she even ran to the banquet in the pouring rain just to make a good impression. Who would have thought that when she arrived in a disheveled state, President Chung would arrogantly mock her for being embarrassing, but his body would thoughtfully cover her head with a jacket. Although this man was a jerk most of the time, sometimes he was damn considerate. As a little vixen, she naturally understood to immediately press herself against him, raising a bright smile. Then she quickly pecked him on the cheek. Before he could start lecturing her, she quickly turned and ran to the restroom, leaving President Chung to touch the spot she had just kissed, his cheeks slightly red, a hint of sweetness blooming in his heart. She was already not feeling well, and on top of running frantically in the rain, Jiang Qingli felt completely drained and weak. Suddenly, she heard an unfamiliar woman in the restroom call out to her. "Excuse me, miss, the back of your dress. You know what I mean?" Jiang Qingli nervously turned and pulled her skirt to look. Sure enough, there was a large blood stain on the light blue dress, looking particularly conspicuous. The woman kindly handed her a stain remover pen, telling her to apply it quickly and it would be clean soon. And it really worked. The small stain remover pen was surprisingly effective. With the woman's help, the dress was cleaned up without a trace. This smiling woman was gentle and kind. Jiang Qingli was immediately reminded of her deceased sister, and a sense of inexplicable closeness arose. She asked the woman's name, which was Dai Wei. As she was about to return the stain remover pen, Dai Wei warmly shook her head and told her to keep it. With that, she waved and left. However, Jiang Qingli held the pen and pondered for a moment. If she remembered correctly, President Chung had a rival company whose PR managers' surname was Dai. Out of caution, she held the pen up to the light. She immediately saw a pea-sized object inside the pen's body. This little thing must be a listening device. It seems the business world is treacherous and full of traps, but would be a waste not to use this unsolicited favor. So she clutched the pen and hurried after her. "Thank you, but I just ordered one online." Jiang Qingli smiled and pushed the pen back into the other woman's hand. Her innocent and pure smile showed no trace of anything unusual. Dai Wei was momentarily unsure how to react and could only smile awkwardly and ask for her name. She didn't ask when she introduced herself earlier, but only now. It was obvious she already knew her name. However, Jiang Qingli pretended to be naive and introduced herself. "My surname is Jiang, and I'm his secretary at Qingshan. I came with my boss." The other party immediately suggested exchanging contact information. She played along and didn't refuse. This scene of two women, each with their own ulterior motives, acting against each other, happened to be witnessed by a man. It turned out that President Chung, seeing that Jiang Qingli had been in the restroom for a long time, had come over to check on her. But he unexpectedly ran into this little vixen, who seemed to know the woman who had drugged him. Dai Wei was unexpectedly outmaneuvered by her own target, who demanded she compete in a drinking contest with a bunch of heavy drinkers. But she was no pushover. She immediately demanded the man's entire evening as a reward for completing the task. It's true that when a man acts strangely, he's definitely up to no good. Just coming out of the restroom, Jiang Qingli unexpectedly ran into President Chung, smoking in a corner. Her previous investigation had clearly stated that this man had quit smoking a long time ago. Why had he suddenly started again recently? Strange, very strange. But none of this was her business. She just had to continue playing her role as a vixen. So she quickly feigned surprise. "Senior, were you waiting for me here specifically?" President Chung had suspected from the beginning that this little vixen had ulterior motives, but he had no proof. Just now, he happened to see her looking very familiar with the PR from the rival company. The man concluded that she was a corporate spy sent by the rival. At this thought, an inexplicable anger surged in President Chung. He suddenly leaned in close, lifted the little vixen's chin, and questioned what she had been doing in the restroom for so long. He didn't know his own strength, squeezing her delicate face until it was almost deformed, causing tears to well up in Jiang Qingli's eyes from the pain. She truly didn't know where this man's anger was coming from, but she always remembered her goal of seduction. "Senior, do you want to do it here?" "I don't have a problem with it. I'm just afraid that with you being so active, you might hurt yourself." He had never seen such a shameless woman. At least 9.5 out of 10 sentences were about sex. In short, her main theme was being utterly shameless. President Chung suddenly, irritably, pulled her into the banquet hall. Their appearance together instantly caused a stir among the guests. Doesn't President Chung never have a female secretary? He probably only hired her because she's a different type from Miss Ya. After all, Miss Ya is President Cheng's most beloved fiancée. Possible, very possible. However, President Chung ignored the probing gazes of the crowd and instructed his assistant to spread the word. Whoever could outdrink Jiang Qingli tonight would earn the right to hand their proposal directly to him. Hearing this, Jiang Qingli's pupils trembled in disbelief. Was this scoundrel of a man really planning to let her drink herself to death? But then she heard President Cheng's cold laugh. "What? Can't Secretary Jiang do it? I've said before, Chengxin doesn't support idlers." This was extremely provocative, and it immediately ignited Jiang Qingli's damn competitive spirit. The woman who was just uneasy a moment ago instantly became full of confidence. She even boldly approached the man and, in turn, demanded a reward for completing the task. It wasn't much, just for the great president to accompany her for the whole night. President Chung was about to scold her in embarrassment and anger, but she had already fluttered away like a beautiful butterfly. As per the man's request, the beautiful butterfly, holding a glass of red wine, gracefully moved among the guests. The swirling red wine reflected her exquisite face. However, the fiery gazes of those men made President Chung, who was secretly watching from the side, very unhappy. It was as if his exclusive treasure was being ogled by others. A very uncomfortable feeling. One glass after another. Even the assistant couldn't help but worry if something would happen to Jiang Qingli drinking like this. Who would have thought the arrogant CEO would reply sarcastically, "Don't worry, the women under Su AO are all incredibly good drinkers." Now the assistant was even more confused. If he knew Jiang Qingli was sent by a rival, why keep her around? Not long after President Chung left in a huff, a graceful and wealthy socialite approached Jiang Qingli. The president actually lost his temper with his own sister in public, just because his sister had just slapped the female spy sent by the rival company. Crazy, crazy. He himself felt he was going crazy. Just a moment ago, he had decided that he would never, ever pay attention to Jiang Qingli, that vixen, again. He would let her be plied with alcohol by men with ill intentions. Who would have thought that just a short while after he left, a graceful and wealthy lady would approach Jiang Qingli? "Miss Jiang, would you mind having a word?" But Jiang Qingli didn't know this noble woman. However, at this point, she was already a bit tipsy and could use this opportunity to slip away. So she smiled and nodded in agreement. As soon as they entered the lounge in the corner, she was about to politely ask the other person's name when suddenly a loud slap landed squarely on her face. This was followed by a torrent of angry curses. "You are truly shameless. One moment you're tricking Yang into the slammer, the next you're clinging to Ayu. Blah, blah, blah." Dressed as a noble woman, she was cursing with the ferocity of a common shrew. From the stream of profanities, Jiang Qingli quickly guessed that this was Tang Yang's mother. Who still has such old-fashioned family drama in the year 4202? She didn't mind teaching the other party what high-level green tea artistry was. Free of charge, tears suddenly started streaming down her face. "Pretty big sister, I was wrong. I'm not worthy of an excellent man like Yang. You should find a pretty and classy young girlfriend like you." This completely stunned Tang's mother. Her face turned red and then dark, unsure whether to continue being angry or to be happy about being praised as young and beautiful by a girl in her 20s. The anger was stuck in her throat, making her even more uncomfortable. Just then, President Chung came looking for Jiang Qingli. As soon as Tang's mother saw him, she immediately and imperiously ordered him to get her son out of the slammer. Helplessly, President Chung could only patiently explain that Tang Yang was driving under the influence and deserved to be taught a lesson. However, Tang's mother was being completely unreasonable, pointing at Jiang Qingli and shouting, "The one who should be taught a lesson is this shameless woman. My son was corrupted by this vixen." However, Jiang Qingli, as a New Age vixen at the forefront of the times, bowed and scraped an apology when cursed at "I'm sorry. You were just too young and beautiful. I didn't know you were Tang Yang's mother. I thought you were. Anyway, I'm very sorry. Go, go, go." Tang's mother was rendered unable to continue scolding. But President Chung couldn't watch anymore. He suddenly stood in front of Jiang Qingli, exuding an aura of "Who dares to be insolent while I'm here?" Seeing his unreasonable sister wanted to continue making a scene, the man's face instantly darkened, and he threatened her ominously, "If you dare to cause any more trouble, I won't approve a single cent for brother-in-law's new project." As expected, Tang's mother's weak spot was hit. She had no choice but to obediently let President Chung push her away. But before leaving, she didn't forget to fiercely throw out a threat: "Don't pester our Tang Yang anymore." With that, she strode away with her head held high. After finally getting rid of his difficult sister, President Chung turned his head. He secretly examined the red, swollen handprint on Jiang Qingli's face, not understanding why this usually formidable woman didn't even dodge when she was hit this time. But Jiang Qingli smiled and wiped away her tears. What's the point of dodging? If I get hit, Senior will feel sorry for me. Then I'll know that Senior actually cares about me so much. After speaking, she even moved closer and lightly took the man's arm. This and that. Is it too late for him to argue that he was just afraid of losing face? The stubborn man's face instantly flushed with shyness. With the time, place, and mood all right, a restless hand suddenly wrapped around the man's waist. Her whole body then softly fell into his broad embrace. "Senior, thank you for helping me out. I know you actually have feelings for me." Feeling the delicate person in his arms squirming restlessly, a complex look flashed through the man's eyes. President Chung felt his heart was about to be crushed. His hand was about to embrace her back, but suddenly stopped mid-air. No, that's not right. This little vixen was sent by Su Ao to get close to him. He absolutely could not fall for this trap a second time. Little did he know that the person Su Ao most wanted to get close to now had become Jiang Qingli. The man was clearly moved, but he forced himself to act cold. He pushed the woman he liked away. Who would have thought that right after, the woman would be taken away by the rival CEO? It turned out that President Chung mistakenly thought Jiang Qingli was a corporate spy sent by his rival, Su Ao. Logically, he should resist, but his excited heart couldn't help but yearn to get closer. The conflicted man simply hardened his heart and forced himself to be cold, sending her away. Qingli was so angry at this unpredictable man that her teeth itched. If looks could kill, President Chung would have been sliced to pieces by now. Suddenly, a wave of nausea from the alcohol hit her, and her stomach churned. She rushed into the restroom, her inner confusion turning into vomit. Stimulated by the alcohol, the pain in her abdomen was instantly magnified. "Forget it, I'll just go back for now." As soon as she stepped out of the women's restroom, she heard an unfamiliar male voice. He called out to her, "Miss Jiang." Looking in the direction of the voice, she saw a cool-looking man speaking leisurely. "So President Cheng's secretary also needs to solicit business with drinks. I thought the aloof President Chung was immune to my social tactics." But Jiang Qingli didn't know this handsome man at all. When she heard him enthusiastically introduce himself as Su Ao, she immediately realized the man was the legendary self-made investment genius who, in just a few short years, had become President Cheng's biggest competitor. An investment genius actively approaching her, a mere secretary. The smart woman immediately sensed something was wrong. So she took the initiative to speak with a smile, stating that she, a disgraced secretary, had no say in front of President Chung, implying that he shouldn't waste his efforts on her. However, as she spoke, her vision gradually blurred. Then, a strong wave of dizziness hit her. Her legs gave way, and her whole body uncontrollably fell into President Ao's arms. Meanwhile, back in the crowded venue, the annoyed President Chung found his tipsy sister. "You'd better make her stay away from me, Yang. Also, Jin Xiao is coming back next month. You should start preparing for the wedding." Hearing this, President Cheng's pupils trembled. He began to faintly resist this marriage of obligation. But the flustered man maintained a calm expression. "If you have time, go talk to your son. Tell him not to waste all his energy on my employee. Isn't that because your employee seduced him first? But this girl has good taste. She actually said I was Yi Yang's girlfriend." While the wealthy socialite was lost in her mindless self-admiration, the assistant quietly appeared behind her, looking like he had something to say. But he lowered his head hesitantly, and after a moment of indecision, he still didn't know how to say it. President Chung was getting impatient and simply ordered him to take Jiang Qingli home first. Only then did the assistant timidly raise his head and reply, "I just saw Secretary Jiang get into President Ao's car." Hearing this, President Cheng's movements froze. A green-tinged fury gathered in his brows, as if only this could restrain the violent rage about to erupt. Her brainless nephew became her ex-boyfriend. The cold uncle is her current ambiguous partner. At the same time, she is also being crazily pursued by her uncle's future cousin-in-law. This is simply the most top-tier chaotic battlefield in the entire history of comics. Just yesterday, under the triple whammy of period pain, drunkenness, and a fever, Jiang Qingli suddenly fainted from discomfort into the arms of the rival, President Su. When she finally, groggily opened her eyes, she immediately realized she was being held. She subconsciously looked up and was shocked. How could it be Su Ao? However, the man feigned kindness and sympathized with her, having to come out and socialize when you're not feeling well. President Chung really doesn't know how to cherish a woman. However, the clever Jiang Qingli immediately and alertly pulled away, like a startled little fox, full of strong hostility. Her sharp reaction immediately earned President Su's appreciative gaze, as expected of the clever woman who helped President Chung win over Dr. Jason. After taking the umbrella from Secretary Dai, the man left a meaningful sentence that "I look forward to our next meeting." With that, he opened the umbrella and disappeared into the vast curtain of rain. Seeing Secretary Dai following closely behind, what else was there not to understand? Their attempt to plant a listening device on her just now was their scheme. It seems President Su's scheming is unusually deep. She only hoped President Chung didn't know about this. Otherwise, all her previous efforts and sacrifices would be in vain. Afterwards, she took 3 days off to rest at home and felt refreshed. The only thing that annoyed her was that President Chung, that scoundrel, didn't even contact her, as she was lost in thought. Her best friend Lon Xiaoyu came to feed her with a lot of delicious food. But in order to maintain her perfect state at all times, she could only drink some coffee. Seeing this, her best friend couldn't help but feel sorry for her, hoping she wouldn't push herself too hard. Besides, she was already halfway to success. However, Jiang Qingli gave a self-deprecating laugh. Chungyu's attitude towards me is like a snack that's been delivered to his mouth. It tastes good, so he eats it. But to say he would abandon Xia Jinxiao for me, that's far from enough. She had suffered a lot over the years for her revenge, which made her very clear-headed and realistic. Even so, her best friend still worriedly reminded her, what if you end up actually falling in love with him? In the end, you'll be the one who gets hurt. As soon as she finished speaking, Jiang Qingli instantly bristled, quickly denying that she would ever have a day where her brain went haywire. Just as they finished talking about President Chung, she received a harassing text from another disgusting man. Ever since she added Zhang Bailing's contact information, she had been bombarded with invitation texts all day. What a persistent annoyance. Just the thought that this scumbag was also involved in her sister's incident back then made her so angry she wanted to reach through the phone and strangle him. After glaring for a while, she suddenly asked Xiaoyu slyly if she could help crack a phone. That I've never tried, but I'll do my best. After getting her best friend's affirmative reply, she replied with a simple, okay, agreeing to attend the welcome back party, the ultimate chaotic battlefield. A party is supposed to be a fun and relaxed real party. But her party was simply a collection of love debts, a battlefield at every step. It brought together her love-struck ex-boyfriend, her current ambiguous man, and the admirer who was pursuing her. And the most fatal thing was, these three men were all related to each other. If she had known, she would have asked who would be at the party yesterday. Actually, this welcome back party was for Tang Yang, who had just gotten out of the slammer. However, this love-struck man only cared about whether Jiang Qingli was really hit by his mother. Was she badly hurt, or was her self-esteem wounded, leading her to consider resigning? Otherwise, President Chung immediately and decisively cut off his nephew's endless rambling. Will you ever be done? If you're going to the welcome back party, hurry up and go home to change. After irritably sending away the love-struck eyesore, President Chung couldn't help but snort coldly. He thought to himself, with that little vixen's shameless personality, it would be a good thing if she took the initiative to resign. But he hadn't been harassed at all during her 3-day leave. This quietness, he was actually a little unused to it. This was too abnormal. Was it a game of playing hard to get, or was it some new scheme from President Su? As if possessed, he clicked on Jiang Qingli's profile picture, but accidentally double-tapped it. He watched helplessly as the chat box immediately displayed, "You patted Jiang Qingli's slender waist." He hastily tried to retract it, but the phone prompted that the other party was not using the latest version and it might not be retractable. He flared up in anger. What damn dog of a feature did some godforsaken person invent? Accidentally double-tapping a profile picture becomes a pat. Now he wanted to retract it, but couldn't. He could only facepalm helplessly, waiting for the little vixen to take advantage of the situation. But it wasn't until evening that Jiang Qingli finally sent a text. "Senior, miss me? I have an appointment tonight that I can't get out of. See you tomorrow. Love you." Even through the phone screen, he could imagine the little vixen must be smiling triumphantly right now, her round eyes twinkling. Damn her, so fake yet so captivating. At this time, Zhang Bailing, as the organizer of this welcome back party, took on the responsibility of livening up the atmosphere. "Young Master Tang, why didn't you bring your little girlfriend?" Still hiding her away like a treasure. But Tang Yang just smiled foolishly without answering. The joke reached the ears of President Chung in the corner. He suddenly felt a tightness in his chest. And at this very moment, Zhang Bailing scurried over with a toast. "Thank you, brother-in-law, for gracing us with your presence today. As it happens, your little brother has a favor to ask you." As soon as he finished, President Chung immediately slammed his wine glass on the table, clearly showing his dislike for this future cousin-in-law. The atmosphere instantly became awkward. Someone jumped in to help, joking around to defuse the tension that "Where's the girl young Master Lin said he'd bring?" The interrupted Zhang Bailing hurriedly made a call and then eagerly ran out of the private room to greet someone. He happened to run into the late-arriving Jiang Qingli. Her slim dress outlined her graceful figure while adding a touch of mystery. The transparent sheer on her arms added a touch of playfulness to the heavy black. Even Zhang Bailing, who had seen countless beauties, couldn't help but be captivated. Wow, simply a perfect goddess. A heavenly fairy. Coming quickly. Everyone in the room looked towards the door. The nephew was stunned, while the uncle frowned in annoyance. A party is supposed to be a fun and relaxed real party, but his party was simply a collection of love debts, a battlefield at every turn. It brought together her love-struck ex-boyfriend, her current ambiguous man, and the admirer who was pursuing her. And the most fatal thing was, these three men were all related to each other. The moment Jiang Qingli stepped into the private room, she captured everyone's attention. This instantly inflated Zhang Bailing's vanity to the extreme. He even got carried away and tried to put his arm around Jiang Qingli's shoulder. Suddenly, a large hand appeared out of nowhere, gripping his wrist tightly. Tang Yang rushed forward with a contorted face and shouted, "Zhang, what do you think you're doing?" One of the men who had seen Jiang Qingli before couldn't help but speak up. "Young Master Zhang, Xiao Li Ziyang's girlfriend. This isn't very cool of you." But another woman thought that Jiang Qingli was trying to two-time them. For a moment, all eyes were on Jiang Qingli. However, Jiang Qingli bit her lip hard, and then 2 streams of free tears instantly rolled down that "I'm not two-timing anyone. Last time, my friend offended Brother Lin, so I agreed to come and apologize. Sob, Yang, I know your mother doesn't like me." Anyone with eyes could see that she was playing the green tea card, but she didn't care as long as she could fool President Chung. While wiping her tears, she stole a glance at the man. She saw President Chung sitting there grimly, not saying a word, but his scorching gaze was almost piercing through her. The little vixen immediately started crying even more dramatically, sobbing with her head thrown back, looking as if she was about to faint any second. Seeing this, the love-struck Tang Yang, both heartbroken and remorseful, apologized in turn. "This is all my fault. I don't know why my mom would do something so awful. So it's the mama's boy who made our Shaoli suffer." Hearing Zhang Bailing's sarcastic taunt, Tang Yang was instantly enraged. He had long been annoyed with this Zhang Bailing. He was just a parasite clinging to Qingjin through his connection with Xia Jinqiao. At this point, with the tension between the two men rising, Tang Yang was the first to throw a punch. Zhang Bailing immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. He then dropped his gangster pretense and was about to rush forward, but was held back by two men. The happy party instantly descended into a chaotic battlefield of jealousy. While everyone was busy holding people back, only President Cheng, sitting in the corner, suddenly grabbed Jiang Qingli's wrist. Ignoring the woman's shock, he dragged her out forcefully until he stuffed her into the car waiting at the door. Assistant Chen drove to a deserted place. After the man gave the order with a low-pressure aura, he shot a cold glare at her. However, the woman who had been crying pitifully actually leaned in with a grin. "Senior, you don't have to find a deserted place just because you miss me. As long as..." Before she could finish, President Chung cut her off through gritted teeth that a deserted place is good for disposing of a body. This couldn't scare the audacious little vixen. Her slender, boneless body leaned directly into the man's embrace. "Senior, you wouldn't have the heart to kill me. Is that so?" The strands of her hair swayed, and President Cheng's rationality swayed with them. At this moment, the assistant quickly stopped the car. Muttering, "Going for a smoke?" he disappeared on the spot. In a deserted park, the wind blew higher under the moon and among the flowers. The little vixen quickly turned, wrapping her arms around the man's shoulders. Inch by inch, she leaned closer, slowly eroding the man's proud self-control.